The sensor screen flickered within. Impossible reading. Rachel Torres leaned closer, her breath catching as the numbers scrolled past. 200 years. The signal was 200 years old, using a frequency that modern ships had abandoned generations ago. Her colony transport, the UNS Horizon, was 3 days from Earth when the distress beacon pierced through the void, confirmed that. Reading, Rachel said to her navigation officer. The young woman's hands moved across the controls, checking in, rechecking the data. Confirmed. Captain, it's authentic. The encryption matches military protocols from the first contact war era. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. The first contact war had ended before her grandmother was born. Any ship from that period should be dust and debris by now scattered across the stars. She pulled up the beacon's identification code and felt the deck shift beneath her feet. UNS Defiant. The name sent chills through anyone who knew their history. The Defiant was Earth's pride, the most advanced battleship ever constructed. It had vanished during a routine patrol, taking its crew of 800 souls into legend. Every child learned about the lost ship in school. Every military officer knew the mystery had never been solved. Plot and intercept course, Rachel ordered. Captain, I must protest. The voice came from the back of the bridge. Ambassador Hirer, the Covenant Assembly's observer, assigned to monitor human expansion, stepped forward. His forearms gestured in what Rachel had learned was agitation. That sector falls under Galactic Council jurisdiction. You must report this finding and await proper authorization. Rachel turned to face the ambassador. His species, the Viren, had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. They treated humans like children, playing with dangerous toys. Ambassador, that's a human vessel. My people, I'm investigating. The regulations are clear, so is my conscience. Navigation, execute the course change. The Horizon altered its trajectory, burning hard toward the beacon source. Rachel watched the ambassador retreat to his quarters, no doubt preparing a lengthy complaint to his superiors. She would deal with the political fallout later. Right now, history was calling. 12 hours later, they found her. The Defiant hung in space like a ghost, her hull unmarked by battle damage or debris impacts. The ship looked factory fresh, as though she had just left Earth's orbital shipyards yesterday instead of 2 centuries ago. Running lights blinked in steady patterns along her kilometer-long frame. Power signatures registered active across all systems. She's alive, the engineer whispered. How is that possible? Rachel assembled a boarding team. Protocol demanded caution, but curiosity burned hotter than regulations. She led 6 crew members across the void, their magnetic boots clanging against the Defiant's outer hull as they cycled through the airlock. The interior lights activated as they entered, responding to their presence. Emergency lighting cast everything in pale blue, making shadows dance along the corridors. The air tasted stale but breathable, recycled through functioning life support systems for longer than Rachel could imagine. Spread out, find the bridge, and engineering, look for any sign of the crew. They split into pairs, moving through passages that seemed frozen in time. Personal effects sat on desks in crew quarters. Coffee mugs rested beside terminals. A child's drawing hung on one cabin wall, depicting Earth as a blue Marble surrounded by stars, everything suggested the crew had simply stepped away moments ago, intending to return. Rachel reached the bridge and stopped. The command chair faced the main view screen, and sitting on its armrest was a data pad. She picked it up, thumbing it. Active. The device responded. Immediately, its power cells somehow still charged after all these years. Captain's log entries filled the screen. Rachel scrolled through them, her eyes widening with each passage. The Defiant hadn't been lost in battle. They had detected an anomaly, investigated against orders, and found something. Entries grew more excited, more cryptic. References to structures older than the Council itself, technology that made their weapons look like stone axes. The final entry made Rachel's blood run cold. Day 73,000. We've learned the truth about what the Council has been hiding. The Dead Reach isn't a quarantine zone, it's a treasure vault they're keeping locked. We've integrated what we found. The ship is more than she was. We're coming home. They won't be able to stop us from sharing this. Captain Owen Webb. Captain, her engineer's voice crackled through the comm. You need to see this engineering section now. Rachel made her way down 3 decks, following the sounds of confused voices. Her team had gathered around the main reactor core, their helmet lights illuminating something that made no sense. Reactor was standard fusion, human-built and human-designed, but growing through it like crystalline vines were structures that seemed to bend light around themselves. They pulsed with faint energy, beautiful and utterly alien. It's integrated into every major system. The engineer reported power distribution, weapons, engines, even life support. I've never seen anything like this. It's not Council technology. It's not anything in our databases. Rachel touched one of the crystals. It felt warm, almost alive under her glove. The surface rippled at her touch, sending patterns of light cascading through the network of growths. The ship speakers crackled to life, making everyone jump. A voice emerged, distorted and layered as though multiple people were speaking in perfect unison. Authorization required. Captain Webb is unavailable. Command structure compromised. New command protocol needed. Please identify yourself. Rachel swallowed hard. This is Captain Rachel, tour of the UNS Horizon. Who am I speaking to? A pause stretched long enough that Rachel thought the voice had gone silent. Then it spoke again, clearer this time. We are the crew of the Defiant. We are the ship. We are what comes after. Welcome home, Captain. Tor, you need to understand what we found. You need to understand what the Council has done. They're already coming to stop us. As if summoned by the words, Rachel's comm unit buzzed. A priority message from Earth. The Galactic Council had detected their discovery. A fleet was already assembling. They were demanding immediate surrender of the Defiant. The message ended with a single word that made Rachel's stomach drop. Quarantine. News traveled fast in the age of quantum communication. Within 6 hours, every human colony knew about the Defiant's return. Within 12, the Galactic Council had convened an emergency session. Rachel watched the proceedings from her quarters aboard the Horizon, her tablet streaming the official broadcast as representatives from 100 species argued about Earth's newest crisis. The Council chamber on Unity Station was a massive sphere designed to make everyone feel equally small. Representatives floated in their designated positions, their translation devices creating a chaos of overlapping voices. At the center, Supreme Arbiter Kellen raised his primary manipulator for silence. His species, the Tojish, had served as peacekeepers for the Council for 3,000 years. They were very good at making smaller civilizations obey. The matter is simple, Kellen announced, his words translated into every known language. Simultaneously, the humans have recovered a vessel contaminated with architect technology. Galactic law is clear. All architect remnants must be destroyed immediately. We demand Earth surrender the vessel within 48 hours. The human representative, Ambassador Richard Hayes, spoke up from his position. That ship contains the remains of 800 human souls. We have a right to investigate. You have no rights regarding architect technology, another council member interrupted. The quarantine protocols supersede all salvage claims. This is not negotiable. Rachel turned off the feed. She had heard enough. The council was scared, and scared people made dangerous decisions. She pulled up the research files her team had compiled over the past day. They had barely scratched the surface of what the Defiant had become. David Park, her chief engineer, had worked without sleep trying to understand the crystalline structures growing through the ship. His latest report sat in her inbox, marked urgent. Rachel opened it and read quickly, her eyes widening at each paragraph. The crystals were not just power conduits, they were processing units, quantum computers that made human AI look like counting beads. They could manipulate spacetime at scales previously thought impossible. The weapon systems had been completely redesigned around principles that violated half the known laws of physics. And most disturbing of all, the crew was still there, their consciousness somehow preserved and integrated into the ship systems. A knock at her door broke her concentration. Come in. David entered, looking exhausted but excited. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of too much coffee and too little rest. Captain, we've made contact with them, the crew. They're willing to talk. Rachel followed him back to the Defiant. The ship felt different now, aware of their presence. The lights seemed to track their movement through the corridors. The air circulation adjusted to their comfort. It was like walking through a living thing. They gathered in what had once been the mess hall. Rachel's technical team had set up communication equipment, trying to find the best way to interface with whatever the crew had become. Holographic display flickered to life, showing the faces of people who had been dead for 2 centuries, except they were not quite dead and not quite alive either. Captain Owen Webb appeared in the center of the projection. He looked exactly as he did in historical photos, down to the scar on his left cheek from some long ago accident, but his eyes held something beyond human, a depth that suggested vast experience, compressed into a gaze. Thank you for coming back for us, Webb said. His voice sounded normal, not the layered echo from before. We weren't sure anyone would. What happened to you? Rachel asked. The logs mentioned the dead reach, but they don't explain this. Webb's image smiled sadly. We found what the council has been hiding for millennia. The architects were real, and they left more than ruins behind. They left a gift, or maybe a test technology that responds to consciousness, that merges with biological thought patterns. We didn't understand what we were activating until it was too late. Another crew member appeared, a young woman Rachel recognized from memorial records as Lieutenant Amy Walsh. The council found architect sites first. Thousands of years ago, they took the technology, used it to advance beyond everyone else, then locked away the rest. Every law about prohibited technology exists to keep younger species from catching up. They're afraid, a third voice added, afraid of equality, afraid of competition, so they made rules and called them safety protocols. David leaned forward. Can you teach us how it works, the integration process? We can try, Webb said, but understand what you are asking. We are not human anymore, not entirely. We think faster than you can imagine. We perceive dimensions you cannot see. We gave up our humanity to become something else. It's not a choice to make lightly. Rachel thought about the council's ultimatum, 48 hours. She thought about the fleet already assembling to enforce their demands. She thought about 800 people who had sacrificed everything for a discovery that could change humanity's future. How many volunteers would you need? She asked. Webb looked surprised. You are considering it. The council is coming with enough firepower to slag this entire sector. If we fight, we need every advantage. If what you are saying is true, if they have been using this technology while forbidding everyone else from touching it, then they are hypocrites and tyrants. I won't surrender to that. The projections exchanged glances, communicating in ways Rachel could not perceive. Finally, Webb nodded. We would need 50 volunteers minimum to crew the essential systems. The process has risks. Not everyone survives the integration. Those who do will never be the same. I'll call for volunteers, Rachel said. Let them make their own choice. Within 3 hours she had 500 applications, officers and enlisted crew from across the horizon and from Earth's defense stations nearby. Everyone knew what the council represented. Everyone understood what was at stake. Rachel chose carefully, looking for people with the right combination of skill and mental resilience. Her daughter Anne was among the volunteers. Rachel tried to talk her out of it, tried to use her authority as captain and as mother to keep her safe. Anne refused to back down. You taught me to stand up for what's right, Anne said. You taught me that some things are worth any price. This is one of those things, Mom. Rachel signed the authorization with shaking hands. 50 names, including her own daughter. They began the integration process that evening, lying in modified med bays, while the crystalline structures grew into their neural tissue. Rachel stood watch over Anne's bed, holding her hand as the machines worked. Not all 50 survived. 7 did not wake up. Their minds could not adapt to the expansion of consciousness the architect technology demanded. Rachel added their names to the list of people this crisis had caused, knowing more deaths would follow. But 43 did wake up. They opened eyes that glowed faintly with inner light, minds that now operated on levels beyond human comprehension. Anne sat up, looked at her mother and smiled. I can see everything, she whispered. Mom, it's beautiful. The council fleet entered the Sol system. 18 hours later, 500 warships materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system. They're faster than light drives, leaving ripples in space that made sensors scream across every human installation. Rachel watched them appear on the tactical display, each red icon representing firepower that could crack a planet's crust. The Council had brought their hammer, and they intended to use it. Supreme Arbiter Kellen's face filled every screen in human space. Moments later, his broadcast was marked as Priority Alpha, impossible to ignore or block. Humans of Earth and the colonial territories hear the judgment of the Galactic Council. You harbor forbidden technology in violation of the quarantine protocols. You have 48 hours from this transmission to surrender the vessel designated UNS Defiant for immediate destruction. Failure to comply will result in the complete isolation of your species. No trade, no communication, no contact with galactic civilization until such time as you demonstrate proper respect for laws designed to protect all species. The transmission ended. Silence fell across command centers from Mars to the outer colonies. Rachel stood on the bridge of the Defiant, her new volunteers manning stations that had been empty for 2 centuries, and sat at the navigation console, her enhanced mind already calculating trajectories and battle patterns that would have taken normal humans hours to process. They're serious, Admiral James Offer said from the main screen. Earth's highest-ranking officer looked tired, older than his 60 years. Behind him, Rachel could see the chaos of Earth's Defense Coordination Center. The Council has never mobilized a fleet this size for enforcement action. They're scared of what we might do with that ship. Good, Rachel replied. They should be scared. They have been lying to every species in the galaxy for thousands of years, keeping everyone weak while they stayed strong. We can't win a fight against 500 ships. Rachel, our entire defense fleet is 97 vessels. Most of them are patrol craft and system defense platforms. We have 12 actual warships, and the Defiant is the only one with technology beyond standard Council-approved specs. Rachel looked around her bridge. The volunteers moved with eerie precision, their enhanced minds coordinating through the ship systems without speaking. They were becoming what the original crew had become, something between human and machine, consciousness and code. We don't need to win, Rachel said. We need to survive long enough to show the galaxy what the Council really is. Webb, you're listening to this. What are our chances? The crystalline structures throughout the bridge pulse with light, and Owen Webb's voice emerged from the ship's speakers. In a straight fight, numbers would overwhelm us eventually, but the architect technology doesn't fight straight. We can bend space, manipulate probability, edit reality at quantum scale. The Council's ships are advanced by galactic standards, but they're still operating on principles that are 10,000 years old. We're operating on principles their species couldn't understand even if we explained them. David Park studied the sensor readings from his engineering station. The Council fleet is deploying in a standard blockade formation, 3 layers of ships creating an interdiction sphere around the inner system. They're preparing for us to run, not fight. They don't think we're stupid enough to engage, Anne said. Her voice carried a strange echo now, as though she was speaking from multiple places simultaneously. They expect surrender or retreat. They've never encountered resistance from a species they've threatened with quarantine before. Rachel pulled up the communication logs from the past 2 days. Dozens of Council member species had sent secret messages to Earth encouraging compliance, but she noticed something interesting. Those Messages came from species that benefited from council patronage. The civilizations granted preferred trading status and better technology licenses. The species at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy had been silent or had sent very different messages. One transmission stood out from a species called the Haleth. They were a mammalian race who had been exploring space for 400 years, never advancing beyond what the Council deemed appropriate. Their message was brief. The young species stand with Earth. We are tired of asking permission to grow. Rachel smiled. The Council had overplayed their hand by making this confrontation so public. They had exposed the power structure that kept most species in permanent inferiority. Whatever happened in the next 48 hours would reshape the galaxy. She opened a channel to Admiral Akifer. Sir, I'm requesting that Earth's government issue a formal response to the Council's ultimatum. What response? We don't have the leverage to negotiate. We tell them no, simple as that. No surrender, no retreat, no apology. We found our ship, our people, and we're keeping them. If the Council wants to enforce their unjust laws, they'll have to go through us. Akifer was quiet for a long moment. Rachel could see him wrestling with the decision, weighing the survival of humanity against principles that mattered more than survival. Finally he nodded. I'll take it to the Security Council, but Rachel, if they approve this, if we draw this line, we might not survive to see if we were right. I know, sir, but some things are worth the risk. 8 hours later, Earth's unified government delivered their answer. Every broadcast channel, every communication satellite, every quantum relay carried the same message. No surrender. Humanity would not bow to threats. The Defiant was theirs by right of salvage and blood. If the Council wanted, they would get one. The galaxy watched with held breath. Younger species cheered in secret. Older Council members called emergency sessions, and in the empty space between Earth and the Council fleet, tension built like a storm about to break. Supreme Arbiter Kellen responded within minutes. His measured diplomat's tone was gone, replaced by cold fury. You have made your choice. The Council fleet will advance to enforce compliance, resist, and we will do more than quarantine your species. We will make an example that will echo for generations. Surrender now or face extinction. Rachel looked at her crew, her daughter. Among them, she saw determination in their enhanced eyes, fear mixed with courage and defiance. They knew the odds. They chose to stand anyway. All hands battle stations. Rachel ordered. Let's show them what humans do when someone tries to put chains on us. Defiant systems came alive with power that made space itself ripple. The crystalline networks throughout the ship blazed with light. Anne and the other enhanced crew members linked their consciousness fully with the vessel, becoming extensions of its capabilities. What had been a battleship became something else entirely, something the galaxy had not seen since the architects walked among the stars. The Council fleet began its advance, weapons charging, shields at maximum. They came to crush a rebellion before it could spread. They came with the confidence of overwhelming force and ancient authority. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The 48-hour deadline expired. The shooting started. 30 seconds later, the first salvo came from the Council's outer sphere. 200 ships firing in perfect synchronization. 10,000 plasma torpedoes streak across the void, their fusion warheads bright. Enough to blind unprotected sensors. Enough firepower to vaporize a moon. Converged on the human defensive. Positions clustered around the Defiant. And felt the torpedoes coming through. The ship's enhanced sensors, each one a bright point of destructive potential in her expanded awareness. Time moved. Differently for her now. What took seconds for normal humans stretched into subjective minutes for her consciousness. Merged with architect technology. She could see the trajectories, calculate the impact points, understand the mathematics of annihilation headed there. Way, recommend defensive protocol Omega. She said, her words arriving in her mother's mind almost before she spoke. Them, Rachel trusted her daughters. Judgment execute, the Defiant did. Something that made every physicist watching from Earth gasp in disbelief. Space around the human fleet inverted, folding in on itself like a sheet of paper creased along impossible angles. The plasma torpedoes entered the fold and emerged somewhere else entirely. 300,000 km behind the attacking ships, right in the middle of the Council's second defensive layer. Explosions bloomed across the Council. Formation as their own weapons detonated. Among their own ships. 200 vessels. Destroyed in an instant, torn apart by friendly fire they could not avoid. Shock waves cascaded through the neat formation, scattering ships and spreading confusion. What was that? Supreme Orbiter Kellen demanded from his flagship. What did they just do? His tactical officer, a Vin with 400 years of combat experience, stared at the sensor data with all four eyes wide. Sir, they folded space. They created a localized wormhole and redirected our attack through it. I've never seen anything like it. Our databases have nothing comparable. Kellen's mandibles clicked in agitation. The humans were not supposed to be able to do this. They were a young species, barely 300 years into space travel. They should be using conventional shields and kinetic countermeasures, not rewriting the rules of physics. The Defiant advanced through the gap created by the chaos, moving in ways that made tracking it nearly impossible. The ship did not accelerate in straight lines like normal vessels. It stepped through space, appearing and disappearing in rapid sequence, each jump carrying it closer to the Council fleet. All ships concentrate fire on the Defiant, Kellen ordered. Ignore the other human vessels. Kill that ship and this resistance collapses. 300 warships pivoted toward the advancing battleship, their weapon systems targeting the single vessel that dared challenge Council authority. Energy beams, railgun slugs, and missile swarms converged from every angle. The Defiant stopped jumping. It hung in space, seemingly vulnerable, waiting for the hammer to fall. Rachel watched the incoming fire on her tactical display, counting down the seconds until impact. Beside her, Anne and the other enhanced crew sat motionless, their minds working at speeds that made verbal communication obsolete. Firing main weapon, Anne announced, giving voice to the decision the integrated crew had already made. Collectively, the Defiant's primary armament activated. For the first time with human operators, a beam of impossible light erupted from the ship's bow, not the red or blue of plasma weapons, but a color that human eyes could not quite process, something between violet and a shade that did not exist in normal space. The beam touched a Council dreadnought, and The massive ship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in an explosion, not torn apart by force, just gone, erased from reality as though it had never been there at all. The weapon's fire that had been targeting the defiant past through empty space where the dreadnought had been, missing their intended target. As the defiant jumped again. Impossible, Kellen whispered. There. Editing quantum probability. There. Using architect weapons. More beams lanced out from the defiant. As the enhanced crew found their rhythm. Each shot removed a council ship from existence, creating gaps in the attacking formation that the human defensive fleet exploited with conventional weapons. Earth's smaller ships, guided by volunteers who had integrated with less sophisticated architect technology, moved with precision that should have been impossible for their mass and engine output. David Park, monitoring the battle from Earth's command center, watched in awe. As physics became a suggestion rather than a law, human ships pulled maneuvers that should have turned their crews into liquid pulp from the acceleration forces, but the integrated pilots perceived time differently, experienced the forces across multiple dimensions, distributed the stress in ways that conventional science said were impossible. The Council fleet began to fragment. Some ships held formation, continuing to attack with disciplined fury. Others broke away, their commanders recognizing that they faced something beyond their training and experience. A few open channels, attempting to negotiate to understand what they were fighting. Kellen deployed his reserve strategy, activating devices the Council kept for absolute emergencies, reality anchors, machines designed to suppress exotic physics and force all matter back into conventional space. A dozen anchors activated across the battlefield, creating zones where the normal rules reasserted themselves. The defiance systems flickered as the anchors took effect. For a moment the ship was just a ship again, bound by the same laws as every other vessel, and felt the chain like a weight settling onto her expanded consciousness, crushing her back in limited perception. Anchors detected, she reported, her voice strained. The architect's systems are adapting, but were vulnerable during the transition. The Council pressed their advantage, concentrating fire on the defiant while it struggled against the reality. Anchors, shields that had been impervious, flared and weakened. Hull plating began to superheat under sustained bombardment. Then the architect technology finished adapting. The crystalline structures throughout the ship rewrote their own operational parameters, learning from the anchors and evolving past them. The anchors were based on principles 10,000 years old. The architect tech operated on understanding that predated the Council's entire civilization. The Defiant came back online more powerful than before, its weapons now calibrated to function even inside reality anchor zones, and gasped as her enhanced perception expanded beyond what she had experienced before. She could see not just the present battlefield, but probability branches extending into the future, potential outcomes spreading like a tree of possibilities. They made us stronger, she said, wonder in her voice. The anchors forced the systems to evolve. We're operating on an entirely new level now. Rachel made a decision that would define humanity's future. Target their flagship one shot. Make it count. The Defiant's main weapon charge, drawing power from dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. Every ship in the battle felt the build-up, sensors screaming warnings about energy levels that exceeded safe measurements by orders of magnitude. Kellen saw his death coming and knew he could not avoid it. The beam would erase his ship and him from existence, removing any chance of surrender or survival. Then Rachel gave a different order: adjust aim, fire across their bow, close enough to singe their shields but not destroy them. The beam missed Kellen's flagship by less than a kilometer, close enough that every crew member felt the reality distortion wash over them, close enough to know they should be dead, close enough to understand they had been granted mercy. Rachel opened a channel to the council. Fleet, we could have destroyed you all. Every ship, every crew, we chose not to. Remember that when you report back to your superiors. Remember who showed restraint when they had the power to annihilate their enemies. Silence fell across the battlefield like a blanket smothering sound itself. 300 council ships hung in space there, weapons still charged but no longer firing. Supreme Arbiter Kellen stared at his tactical display, watching the replay of the beam that had passed within a heartbeat of erasing his existence. His hands trembled slightly, a reaction he could not control. Sir, the human vessel is hailing us, his communication officer reported. Put it through. Rachel's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired but resolute, a human showing the strain of command, decisions that carried the weight of species survival. Behind her, Kellen could see the enhanced crew members, their eyes glowing faintly with the light of integrated architect technology. Arbiter Kellen, I'm transmitting data files to your ship and every vessel in your fleet. Share them with the council. Share them with every species in the galaxy. Let everyone see what your government has been hiding. The files arrived seconds later, massive archives of information pulled from the architect sites the Defiant's original crew had discovered. Kellen opened them with shaking hands and felt his certainty crumble with each page he read. Historical records showed the council's founding species had discovered architect ruins 12,000 years ago. They had taken the technology, studied it in secret, and used it to advance far beyond their natural development curve. Then they had hidden the remaining sites, created laws forbidding access to architect technology, and built an entire galactic civilization on the foundation of that lie. Every restriction on weapons development, every limitation on faster than light travel, every regulation that kept younger species dependent on council approved technology had one purpose: keep everyone else weak while the inner circle stayed strong. The quarantine protocols were not about safety, they were about control. You've built your entire government on a lie, Rachel said. You found the same gift the architects left for all species, and instead of sharing it, you locked it away. You made yourselves gods by denying everyone else the chance to grow. Kellen wanted to deny it, to call it propaganda and lies, but the evidence was overwhelming. Council databases, internal memos, archaeological surveys that had been classified at the highest levels. The truth was undeniable. This transmission is going out on every frequency, Rachel continued. Every species in the galaxy is receiving these files right now. You can try to suppress them, but information wants to be free. The truth is out there, and you can't put it back in the box. Across the Galaxy populations erupted in response. On the Halith homeworld, crowds gathered in city squares demanding answers from their council representatives. The Din, a species that had been space-faring for 800 years, without ever advancing past chemical rockets, rioted in their capital city. Dozen civilizations simultaneously demanded emergency council sessions to address the revelations. Kellen watched his entire political career collapse in real time. The council had maintained stability for thousands of years through careful management of technological advancement and strict control of information. That stability was fracturing, and he could feel the shock waves spreading through galactic civilization. "What do you want?" he asked Rachel. "Humanity has won this engagement. You've exposed our secrets. What are your demands?" Rachel glanced at her crew, at her daughter, whose eyes held understanding far beyond human, at the volunteers who had sacrificed their humanity to give Earth a fighting chance. "We want what should have been every species' right from the beginning: equal access to knowledge, equal opportunity to grow, voice in galactic affairs, not permission to exist on your terms. The Council will never accept human membership, not after this. Then the Council will fall. Look at what's happening, Kellen. Your member species are already questioning your authority. How long before they stop asking questions and start making demands? How long before someone else finds an architect's site and decides they don't need your permission anymore?" On Earth, Admiral Akifer watched the confrontation unfold with the rest of humanity. The command center erupted in cheers as Rachel's words echoed across communication channels, but Akifer felt the weight of what came next. They had won the battle, exposed the lie, but the hard work was just beginning. The Halith were the first to break ranks. Their ambassador to the Council transmitted a formal declaration, withdrawing from Council authority and requesting direct diplomatic relations with Earth. Within hours, 6 more species followed. The fractures spread like cracks in breaking ice. Kellen made the calculation that all politicians eventually face. He could fight to preserve a system that was already dying, or he could adapt to the new reality and try to salvage something from the collapse. "I need to consult with the full council. This decision exceeds my authority." "You have 12 hours, Rachel said. "After that, we're taking the Defiant and visiting every architect site in the database we recovered. We're going to share what we find with anyone who wants to learn. You can either be part of building something better, or you can watch from the sidelines while the galaxy moves forward without you." The transmission ended. Rachel sagged in her command chair, the adrenaline of confrontation fatting and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Anne moved to her mother's side, placing a hand on her shoulder. The touch carried more than physical comfort. Through the architect technology linking them, Anne shared a fraction of the vast probability calculations she had been running. Throughout the battle, we had a 42% chance of survival when this started. Anne said softly, "Every decision you made improved those odds. Every moment you chose restraint over revenge bought us allies. We'll need in what comes next." "What does come next?" Rachel asked. "We've torn down their system. Do we have anything to replace it with? We have the truth. We have evidence that civilizations can share knowledge without one dominating all others. We have proof that cooperation works better than control, and smiled her enhanced. I seeing futures that normal humans could only imagine. And we have 50 worlds ready to stand with us if the Council chooses the wrong path. David transmitted from Earth, Captain. You need to see this. The Council is having internal communications issues. Half their member species are refusing orders, their fleet is fragmenting. Rachel pulled up the tactical display and saw the Council formation breaking apart. Some ships were withdrawing from the Sol system entirely, others were taking defensive positions, clearly uncertain whether their own fleetmates were still allies. A few had even moved toward the human defensive line, requesting permission to speak with Earth's representatives. The Council fleet that had come to enforce submission was tearing itself apart from internal contradictions. The truth had exposed. Kellen appeared on screen again, and Rachel could see the defeat in his posture. The Council requests negotiation. We need time to process what you've revealed, to consult with our populations. Can you give us that time? Rachel thought about the volunteers who had died integrating with architect technology. She thought about the crew of the Defiant, preserved for 2 centuries, waiting for someone to understand their sacrifice. She thought about her daughter, transformed into something beyond human for the sake of principles that mattered more than comfort. 2 weeks, she said. We'll hold position in Earth system. Send your diplomats, send your scientists, send whoever needs to understand what we're offering. But understand this, Kellen. We're not going back to the old system. Things change starting now, 3 months after the battle that should have ended humanity's expansion into space. Rachel stood in what had once been the Council's Grand Assembly Hall on Unity Station, the massive sphere that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic governance now hosted something unprecedented. Representatives from 200 species filled the chamber, but the power dynamics had shifted fundamentally. The old Council seats remained empty. Kellen and his fellow orbiters had resigned in disgrace when full audits revealed the depth of technological suppression they had maintained. Some faced criminal charges from their own populations for crimes against advancement. Others had simply disappeared, choosing exile over accountability. The chair recognizes Ambassador Hayes of Earth. The session moderator announced a Halith diplomat named Vess had taken over coordination duties, chosen specifically because her species had no connection to the old power structures. Richard Hayes rose, his formal diplomatic uniform pressed, but his expression tired. The past 3 months had aged him years. Thank you. As we finalize the charter for what we're calling the Open Assembly, I want to address the elephant in the room that nobody wants to discuss. What do we do about the architect sites? Silence fell. The question everyone had been avoiding finally spoken aloud. Earth has access to architect technology, Hayes continued. We've integrated it into our most advanced systems. 53 other species have now requested similar access, and we've shared what we know with 17 of them. But we've also seen what happens when societies try to advance too quickly. The DNR riots killed 2,000 people when their government tried to suppress the information. The Kellish attempted forced integration with architect systems and lost an entire research station. A Viren representative stood requesting recognition. Ambassador. Hayes speaks truth. My own people were complicit in the suppression. We've spent 400 years trying to atone by helping younger species advance safely. We failed because we were working within a corrupt framework. How do we avoid making the same mistakes with new power? Rachel watched the debate from the observer gallery, and beside her, her daughter had become something of a celebrity, one of the first successful integrations with architect technology. Scientists from 100 worlds wanted to study her. Philosophers wanted to debate what she represented and just wanted to understand what she had become. They're scared and said quietly, I can see it in their probability fields. Every species here knows that access to architect technology will change everything. Some will advance responsibly, others will use it for conquest or oppression. Nobody knows how to prevent the bad outcomes without recreating the council's mistakes. What do you see? Rachel asked. You can perceive futures I can't imagine. What happens if we share everything freely? Anne was quiet for a moment, her enhanced mind running through countless possibility branches. Chaos in the short term. At least 30 species will misuse the technology within 5 years. Wars will start. Some civilizations will collapse from internal conflicts over how to integrate advancement. Probably 2 billion sentient beings will die in the conflicts. Rachel felt her heart sink. Then maybe the council was right to restrict access. I wasn't finished, Anne said. That's the cost of freedom, but the alternative, maintaining control through suppression, leads to stagnation. Eventually, someone breaks the restrictions anyway, but by then, resentment has built to the point where the explosion is even worse. The controlled path kills 4 billion over a longer timeline and prevents beneficial advancement that could have saved countless more. So we accept chaos and death as the price of freedom. We accept that growth has costs, and we work to minimize them without preventing the growth itself. Anne pointed toward the assembly floor where the debate continued. That's what they're trying to build, not a system that prevents mistakes, but one that helps civilizations learn from them and support each other through the difficult transitions. David Park appeared on the screen beside the assembly floor, transmitting from a research station humanity had established near the first architect site. Captain Tour, we've made a discovery you need to see. Rachel activated her personal communicator. What is it? The architect sites aren't ruins, they're schools. We've finally translated some of the core programming, and it's an educational system. The technology doesn't just give power, it teaches how to use it responsibly. The council never bothered to learn because they just wanted the weapons and the engines. They missed the whole point. The revelation spread through the assembly like wildfire. If the architect sites were designed to teach, then access should not be restricted but guided. Species could learn at their own pace with support from others who had walked the path before them. A new framework emerged from the debate. The open assembly would maintain records of all known architect sites. Access would be unrestricted, but species could request mentorship from those who had already integrated the technology. No central authority would control who could learn, but a network of mutual support would help prevent catastrophic mistakes. It was not perfect. Nothing involving 200 species with different values and histories could be perfect, but it was honest, and it was open, and it gave everyone the chance to grow. Rachel returned to the Defiant 3 days later. After the charter was signed and the new framework approved, the ship felt different now. The consciousness of the original crew had merged more fully with the vessel systems, becoming less human and more something else entirely. But they remembered why they had sacrificed their humanity, and they were at peace with what they had become. Owen Webb's voice greeted her as she entered the bridge. Captain Tor come to say goodbye. Not goodbye, thank you. You and your crew gave humanity a future we never could have imagined. We gave you a choice, Webb replied. What you do with it is up to you. That's all the architects ever wanted, for every species to have the freedom to choose their own path. Anne joined her mother on the bridge, looking around at the crystalline structures that had transformed them both. What happens to us now? The enhanced, we're not quite human anymore. You're the bridge, Webb said, between what humanity was and what it might become. Some of your people will choose integration, others will remain purely biological. Both paths are valid, both will contribute to your species' future. You'll show them that change doesn't have to mean losing what matters. Rachel thought about the volunteers who had died to give humanity a fighting chance. She thought about the civilizations across the galaxy, grappling with revelations that challenged everything they believed about authority and progress. She thought about her daughter, transformed into something beyond human but still recognizably her child. The council ruled through fear and control for 10,000 years. Rachel said, we're going to try something different. We're going to trust that given the freedom to grow, most species will choose to grow toward the light rather than the darkness. And when some choose darkness, Anne asked, then we'll be here, enhanced humans, integrated consciousness. Whatever we've become, will be the guardians of freedom, not its jailers. We'll help those who stumble, stop those who threaten others, but we won't control anyone's choices. A transmission arrived from Earth. Admiral Offer's face appeared on screen. Captain Tor, we need the Defiant for a diplomatic mission. The Kellish have requested assistance accessing in Architect site safely. They want human advisors to help them avoid the mistakes that cost them their research station. Rachel smiled. This was the future they had fought for, not human dominance but human partnership, not control but cooperation. Tell them we're on our way, Rachel said. And Admiral, start preparing more volunteers for integration training. Something tells me we're going to need a lot more people who can bridge the gap between human and architect technology. The Defiant's engines activated, bending space around the vessel in ways that still made physicists on Earth shake their heads in wonder. The ship that had been lost for 2 centuries, that had returned with weapons beyond galactic law, that had challenged an empire and one now embarked on a new mission, teaching the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for, and that growth was worth the risks that came with it. It